Hi Nadine, how are you?
Hello, I'm Val. How are you? Ready?
Ready? Ready to go? Yeah. Looks like you're nicely set up. I can hear you, I can see you.
Very good. Well, then I go on mute and turn my camera off.
Yeah, I'm just bringing Rob in now.
Okay.
But yes, you're more than welcome to just sit there. And yeah, I will shout out when we're a couple of minutes away. And then, although to be fair with you, you're going to just stay on mute and camera off anyway.
Yes.
Hi
Yes.
Rob, how you doing, Rob?
Hello, Rob.
Hi. Yeah, all good. Nice to meet you, Nadine.
Nice to meet you too. Um, I'll just go on mute and turn off my camera and ask for Anthony to to let me know when it's my turn.
You will, yeah, so uh you will hear us get going basically, and you'll hear me chatting to Rob, and then yeah, you'll hear when that's wrapping up, and then your name will
Perfect.
crop up.
Yes.
Let's
I'll
switch my lights on,
enjoy.
mate.
Have
Okay.
Yeah,
fun.
I was gonna say, Rob, yes. All right, yeah, see you soon, Nadine. If you have any questions, just pop up.
All good so far. Thank you.
All
Enjoy.
right,
Have
cheers.
fun. Bye.
Speak to you soon.
That a bit better. Great, isn't it?
It's a bit better. You might want to
Aggressively.
put the blind down behind you if you've got a blind, or
Yeah,
is it backdrop?
were that possible? Unfortunately, it's like a door.
What are you on? A laptop or a
Oh, God, yeah.
maybe if you just shift it so that it's not directly looking at the door, the light might readjust. Oh, it's quite a big door.
Yeah, it's like basically a whole wall.
Right,
Um,
okay.
what I could try and do is find a lamp,
Yeah, I think a lamp would fix it.
um, shine it in my face. Okay.
Okay, so you happy with everything?
Yeah.
Questions that I sent seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How long have we got?
Yeah, I mean we've got to whip through this bit. 15 minutes.
Okay.
It's a packed
Yeah.
agenda really. So um and then yeah, once we've spoken, you can just drop off the call and hop into the other invite. Um, yeah, so that'll be a different Zoom room that you need to get onto for that. I will ask the audience to pop any questions in the chat box on Swapcard. So I'll keep an eye on it, and if there's anything interesting comes in, I'll incorporate it into what we're saying. But I think we're so pushed for time, and people tend not to ask that many questions anyway. So I reckon we might have a max of one question maybe, but yeah, if we aim to sort of whip through a couple of minutes on each question, we should be about right.
Okay.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, feel free to sit on mute with your camera off, etc. I'll give you a few minute warning just before we're about to go live and bring you back in.
All right. I'm going to find a lamp. Okay.
Lovely. Thanks, Rob.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Hi, Rob. Could you re-emerge, please? Brilliant. Thank you. We start at 12:45, but the actual streaming begins in a couple of minutes. So I will just pin myself so that no one can see you until I introduce you. So if you just want to sit on mute, and then yeah, you'll know when it's your time because I'll be talking to you. Cheers. Hi. Yeah, no, we'll be okay. Yeah, 1 minute. All right, cool. Thank you. Cheers. Bye. Hello to those early birds who are on the platform. We're going to be kicking off in a couple of minutes, so just bear with me and my face while we wait for a few more people to join. Thanks for joining those who are online. I'll be with you in just a second. We're not officially starting for another 2 or 3 minutes, so just going to give a few more people a chance to dial in. Right, I think I'm going to get cracking. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. So this is an online session called Nature Strategy and Resilience for Insurers. Very pleased to be bringing this to you in partnership with Oliver Wyman. So huge thanks to them for sponsoring the event. We've got a cracking group of attendees for this. I think over 100 people have registered, which is fantastic. And it's a really high caliber group. And I know there is a lot of existing knowledge within the group, although obviously the industry is still relatively early in its journey on nature. Having looked at the attendee list, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, all the big headline statistics, like 50% of the world's GDP is reliant in some way on nature and its services. And I'm sure that most of you recognize that nature is rising the agenda and is a big topic now, whether you look at it as a reporting obligation, an emerging risk class, or an opportunity to develop insurance solutions, and in doing so, build resilience. And that's what we're going to look to cover today in 75 minutes. Wish us luck. Very packed agenda, so I'm not going to do too much talking now. Just to quickly explain the structure of the session, we're going to start with an interview with Rob Bailey of Oliver Wyman on nature strategy. We're then going to deep dive into nature-related litigation with Nadine Kudel of Howden. Then Dominique Rudot of Dai-ichi Life and Insure is going to give a short presentation on the role of insurance in scaling nature-based solutions. Then we're going to have a panel discussion unpicking the business case around this and some of the challenges that may need to be overcome. On that, just a quick note, unfortunately, Toby Berman, who was due to be on that panel, is unable to make it today due to personal reasons. So I'm delighted to say that we've managed to get Henri Douche of SCOR, who have recently launched their own nature-based solution to replace Toby. So a fantastic substitution, and huge thanks to Henri. Check out the on-demand content. We have a presentation from Henri that he did at Accelerate Sustainability, our conference in October. That is on the platform in the on-demand content list. We have a presentation from Nature Broking from last year. We're going to be adding a couple of interviews on nature governance with Earth Law Centre and Michelle St. Jane. And we'll send you a follow-up on that over email as well to make sure you know when those are available. Just quickly, bit of housekeeping. We are running some polls, so we're going to have 4 polls running today, 3 in the first session, 1 in the second session. You can see those in the live interaction box in the bottom right of the Swapcard platform. This is also where you would drop any questions you might have for the speakers. So I encourage you to engage with the polls, and obviously, if you have a question, do pop that in there. So I'm going to get cracking now. And bring in Rob Bailey, who is partner climate and sustainability insurance and asset management for Oliver Wyman. Hello, Rob.
Hi, Anthony.
Good to see you again. So I think a good starting point for this conversation on nature strategy would be the disclosure landscape. So can you just quickly kind of bring us up to speed? Where are we on nature risk and impact disclosure? in terms of what's voluntary, what's mandatory, etc., and how should insurers currently be preparing for that?
Sure. Yeah, it's a bit of a tsunami of acronyms, isn't it? I think on the voluntary side of things, the key piece of guidance is the TNFD, Task Force on Nature-related Financial Disclosures, which sets out in a framework which is very much aligned with the TCFD, its kind of climate precursor, how companies should think about disclosing their nature-related risks and opportunities. So it uses the same 4 pillars, ultimately with the objective of making climate and nature disclosures integratable in statements. On the mandatory side of things, the key thing is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, from the EU, which sets out a whole range of mandatory ESG-related disclosures, which include a number of nature elements, things like pollution, ecosystems, circularity, water resources, and so on. Now, these things are sort of they're different frameworks, but there is published guidance on sort of interoperability between them. And ultimately, what it means insurers need to be able to do is to understand their impacts on nature, the risks that arise from that, whether they're transition or physical risks, and the opportunities that arise from that as well. For insurers, that's largely going to be a function of what they insure and what they invest in and where these things are actually located, because nature is hyperlocal. It really matters, where you are extracting a gallon of water or where you are planting an acre of farmland. That has big implications, right? I think the last thing is that it's important not to forget the claims supply chain, because a lot of important nature-related impacts can occur along that claims process, particularly in sort of non-life activities. The other thing, of course, to keep an eye on is the International Sustainability Standards Board, ISSB, which in time will publish guidance on nature disclosures, and they will use the TNFD as their starting point for that, and that will come in time. So essentially, the writing's on the wall. Like you're either exposed to the CSRD, or there's a good chance that at least a number of your entities are going to be in countries that are going to adopt ISSB. And so sooner or later, this is going to be a mandatory requirement for the vast majority of insurers in some form or another.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. And obviously, the disclosure element is a key part of nature strategy, and it's the top priority right now. People have got to get their ducks in a row and try and understand this. But how can we start thinking a bit more strategically about nature? What does a nature strategy look like for an insurer?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to do an impact, risk, and opportunity assessment for TNFD or CSRD, like I think that my main piece of advice would be to take that opportunity assessment piece seriously, to really actually properly examine what you think the opportunities from a transition to a more nature positive economy are going to be across your lines of business and the geographies in which you operate. What are going to be the needs of your clients to transition themselves to more nature positive outcomes, and within that transition, where are there risks that are insurable, and what does that mean for the kinds of products and solutions that you can create? I think the other thing that's coming now, as well as disclosure of risks and opportunities, is nature transition plans in exactly the same way as we've seen for climate. So many of you may have noticed that the Task Force on Nature-related Financial Disclosures in Cali earlier this year published a consultation document on nature transition plans. There are various other initiatives looking at coming up with guidance on this. So I think that will be helpful, because it will force insurers and other businesses to actually really think about, okay, what does a nature positive transition look like for our business? What will it mean in terms of the capabilities that we'll need to develop, new products and solutions that we'll need to develop, the kinds of targets that we'll need to set? I think the other thing to be thoughtful about is, where within the sort of the nature universe you as an insurer want to kind of carve out a niche and differentiate and specialize. Like nature is a very broad topic, and it's kind of difficult to be strategic across all of these different ecosystems, all of these different types of kind of nature-related problems. And so, we're seeing more insurers now think about, okay, what would it mean to have a strategy that's about oceans, or what would it mean to have a strategy that's about circularity in the circular economy, and thinking about what that means across investments, across the supply chain, and across underwriting. And it's I think a very sort of useful process to think about things in those terms.
I think that's a great point about, potentially breaking it into chunks, because it is very different, isn't it, to the whole carbon emissions reporting, which is kind of, fairly binary. And it can be overwhelming to look at nature. Where do you start? So I think that's a really important point. So when it comes to the kind of risk management element of this, and when you start to think about how nature can start to affect risk selection, for example, depending on what your company's kind of vision is and how important you see nature, how can insurers start to think about embedding nature principles or considerations into the underwriting process, into guidelines, risk selection, etc.? And where are we on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the rule number one is think about just avoiding the bad stuff, right? We're degrading nature globally at a pace of knots. We're on the cusp of the sixth great extinction, and so actually stopping to do all the bad stuff is really important. And I suspect actually for a lot of insurers, particularly those that have been working on kind of sustainability topics for some time, when they actually look at their underwriting guidelines, they may find actually there's quite a few nature-related things in there. It's not unusual, for example, among more advanced insurers to see exclusions around things like illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing in marine lines of business, right? It's not unusual to see exclusions around project underwriting and construction projects in areas of high biodiversity value. And so thinking about what are those kinds of exclusions and maybe linking that to your strategy, if you've got an ocean strategy or a circularity strategy, or maybe linking those exclusions to the things that you've identified when you did your materiality assessment as material, but looking to do that on a logical, rational basis, like setting exclusions for where you think you're likely to be having a material impact in your underwriting activities, I think is worth doing. And then the other area where we see more insurers now integrating nature into underwriting is around being able to better recognize the kind of risk reduction benefits that you can get from natural ecosystems for property nat cat covers, right? Is there a coastal ecosystem that reduces inundation and storm surge risk? Is there some kind of natural buffer that reduces wildfire risk that you can actually factor in to your pricing and underwriting decisions?
Brilliant. That kind of touches on something that hopefully is going to come up in the panel later as well, around the risk reduction piece. And I think just briefly to wrap up, if you obviously take a nature strategy to its conclusion, then it becomes about opportunities and product innovation, etc. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for insurers to innovate, both existing products and also thinking about developing new solutions?
Yeah, so when you look at what's happening in the industry at the moment, you see there are some interesting examples with parametric insurance developing covers to protect natural ecosystems. There's a lot of talk about some of these reef insurance products, for example. There's a really interesting conversation around the role of insurance in projects to restore natural ecosystems, right? So if you can finance the restoration of a reef or a mangrove forest, then that can have risk reduction benefits for infrastructure that's coastally located, and in theory that can be financed through some kind of reduction in premiums with the insurance contract recognizing that risk reduction benefit. That it's a really interesting space. largely remaining theoretical at the moment. We haven't actually seen many of these things scale yet. We're seeing innovation in voluntary carbon markets, providing insurance for developers and buyers of nature-based offsets. I think regenerative agriculture is a really interesting example. If insurers can get their pricing and distribution models right, then in theory, you should be able to kind of recognize the risk reduction benefits of more sustainable agricultural practices, and provide a more attractive kind of yield cover and create an incentive for those sorts of practices among farmers as well. I've mentioned circular economy. I think circular economy, particularly in the claims process for P&C insurers, is a really interesting opportunity. And then, of course, insurers are investors, right? And there are going to be huge opportunities around investing in nature-based solutions and natural capital as an asset class, I think. But the last thing is to kind of not forget, it's not just about nature-based solutions. All of these things I've just described is also about helping your clients, if you're a corporate and specialty insurer or commercial insurer, helping your clients transition. And what are the products and solutions that you can provide that will de-risk their transition to a more sustainable business model?
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. Just one question, more of a clarification that's come in, is around when you mentioned transition plans, you were talking specifically about nature as opposed to climate.
That's right. Yeah, there's now work underway to develop and consult on nature transition plans.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for that, Rob. Whistle stop tour. You covered a hell of a lot of ground in 15 minutes. Rob is now going to hair and makeup and will reappear in the nature-based solutions panel. So we'll see you shortly, Rob. Thanks very much. So I'm going to bring in Nadine Kudal now. Nadine is head of nature and climate-related liability at Howden. Hello, Nadine. Good to have you with us.
Hi, Anthony. Thank you so much. And hello to everyone online. Good afternoon.
So we are going to be sort of doing a quick deep dive in, if you can do a quick deep dive into nature-related litigation, what that means for insurers, why we should matter. And I think that's kind of the starting point, right? Why should insurers be aware of nature litigation as a risk?
I think insurers should be aware of this risk because it really represents, and Rob touched upon this, it represents an emerging and increasingly significant risk to both to their clients, but also to their very own operations. And as you know, Anthony, this type of litigation arises from legal actions related to environmental harm, biodiversity loss, and violations of nature's rights. And we are going to talk about this a bit more. But it can have serious financial, but also reputational consequences for businesses.
And to what extent is, nature litigation risk increasing? Is this a growing threat for corporates that are essentially the clients of insurers?
The short answer is yes. So experts do expect a rise in nature-related litigation, excuse me. The longer answer is why. So there are several reasons why experts see that there's a rise in nature litigation coming. And the first one is increased awareness. And again, Rob touched upon the COP in Cali, so the COP on biological diversity. Here, the private sector's role in biodiversity was a prominent feature at the COP because businesses do recognize their responsibility in both contributing to biodiversity loss, but also playing a critical role in its conservation. And in general, we've seen that biodiversity loss is increasingly recognized as a critical issue that intersects with climate change, public health, food security, and so on. So we have more and more NGOs actually focusing on these issues and wanting to protect both natural habitats and endangered species. And equally, when we look at ecosystem services, there's also a recognition of the value of ecosystem services, such as pollination, water purification, etc. And that's equally driving efforts to hold corporations accountable for activities that may degrade these services. The second reason is what's happening in the legal landscape. So we have more enhanced legal frameworks, both on the national and international level. And I just mentioned a few, and I'm sure they will come up again later. So there's the EU's biodiversity strategy for 2030. We have a high seas treaty now. There is the EU nature restoration law, and so on. So they all aim to restore ecosystems and halt biodiversity loss and eventually promote more sustainable business practices. But we also have what Rob mentioned, more standards and frameworks such as TNFD. So I won't go further into that. And then we have an interesting movement around the rights of nature. So these are legal frameworks recognizing the rights of nature, so granting legal personhood to a river or to a forest. And that is really gaining traction in various jurisdictions. And the third reason is corporate accountability, and we just talked about it. So very similar to climate-related due diligence, there's now a push for a mandatory nature-related due diligence, requiring companies to assess and mitigate their impacts on biodiversity and ecosystems. And we've also heard before the focus on supply chains. You may have seen in the news last year when indigenous people from Brazil and I think Colombia it was filed a lawsuit against the French supermarket chain Casino, and they alleged that Casino was selling beef products linked to deforestation. So these type of claims or litigation will draw a line between a certain product and biodiversity loss, and will certainly hold companies more accountable.
Yeah, I think listening to you and Rob, I mean, does illustrate the opportunity for brokers and insurers to play such a big role in helping corporates understand these risks going forward and manage those risks as they become more prevalent. So can we sort of try and bring this to life a bit with some examples? Can you maybe walk us through a few real cases of nature-related litigation to help us understand how this can play out?
Sure. Yes, it's very, very broad, but let me try to put it into different areas of nature-related litigation and different legal arguments we are seeing, the cocktail of legal arguments. So with respect to the areas we are seeing in nature-related litigation, we see cases around deforestation and land use. So litigation against companies involved, for example, in illegal logging or habitat destruction. So destruction of critical habitats that critical for endangered species. Then water is a huge area. So when we talk about water resources, and here we see legal actions against companies for polluting water bodies or for over-extracting for the operations, so excessive extraction of water resources that may then harm ecosystems or even communities that are dependent on these water resources. Marine ecosystems. We see litigation against companies involved in overfishing or, let's say, destructive fishing practices. And plastic pollution, that's a lot of discussions around plastics we have at the moment. So plastic pollution and how that impacts on marine life. And then there's a fourth area around land use and agriculture and how we use pesticides and how the use of pesticides then harms biodiversity and particularly pollinators. And the farming practices and how certain farming practices can have an impact on soil health. So those are sort of the different areas of nature-related litigation, and then experts have started to categorize also the legal arguments in a nature-related litigation. We see three, I would say, we need to look out for. And the first one is the right to a healthy environment, and this is very often mixed with other civil and socioeconomic rights. So we've seen several cases where litigants have framed the protection of nature as a key component specific to the right to a healthy environment. And this is relevant in jurisdictions where the right to a healthy environment is directly recognized in the Constitution. And here you may know that we have 100 countries, so 100 jurisdictions that mention the right to a healthy environment in their constitution. So experts suggest that the strategy may gain really further traction in the future. The second legal argumentation is around the rights of indigenous communities. So we've seen already around the globe a number of cases that have been grounded on the rights of indigenous communities, either because of the lack of informed consultation or the content to a certain project or a certain type of activity. And this is significant because indigenous communities constitute about 5% of the global population, but traditionally they own and manage over a quarter of the world's land. So this is interesting because with respect to more focus on rights of indigenous communities and focus on how do we manage and use land, I think is another area we should look out for or keep track of. And the third one is, and I've mentioned that movement already, is the rights of nature. So this aims to attribute constitutional or legal protection to natural assets, so either a forest, a glacier, a lake. And once this right has been granted, then associations, citizens are enabled to act as stewards in defense of this natural asset. And it's quite interesting because it was Ecuador which made history in, I think it was 2008, to become the first country to enshrine this right of nature in its constitution. And about 4 years ago, local citizens and NGOs in Ecuador challenged the Ministry of Environment's approval of mining concessions in a protected area. And they argued that such actions really threatens the rights to local communities and the rights of nature itself. So there are some landmark cases to look out for.
Brilliant. Thanks, Medine. I mean, it just shows there is so much coming down the line. You can't ignore this. And then I guess the million-dollar question, which we may not really have an answer for yet because it's very early days, is what kinds of insurance portfolios could be affected by these cases? What types of class of business?
Yeah, I think we've discussed this briefly, that there is a need for more solutions. But if we talk about what do we have in place currently, then I think there are several key types of insurance policies that may be relevant here. And I just mentioned a few. I think environmental liability insurance will come to mind very, very easily to coverage for any environmental damage caused by a company's activities. Then D&O insurance, so directors and officers, when we talk about how any decisions of executives, directors, and officers may have resulted in any financial losses or legal claims. General liability insurance, when the claim is related to injuries caused by an environmental incident. Property insurance, as the name suggests, then any damage that may impact property. Legal liability insurance, and there may be some that are specifically designed to cover costs associated, for example, with pollution and any penalties that are related to contamination of air, of water, of land. And I think an interesting area and where we may see some shifts in the future will be around product liability insurance. because and here I'm thinking of chemicals, pesticides, and plastics. You may have followed the discussions around the plastic pollution treaty negotiations in South Korea. So it's a big topic, and I think product liability insurance will be relevant, very, very relevant.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, we will wait and see as these things manifest. And we've probably just got 2 minutes left. So I'm just wondering if there are any learnings from kind of climate litigation that we can bring in here, or any comparisons. And also, if you're just kind of getting started on trying to understand this space, how would where would you look? Are there any resources that you'd recommend?
Okay, I'll do my best in the last 2
And you've
minutes.
got about 90 seconds.
Okay, so yes, there's lots of learnings from climate litigation, and what we see is that it's very similar. So biodiversity or nature litigation is very similar to the developments we've seen around climate litigation, with campaigners targeting countries or governments first, and then companies. I think pollination will be at the forefront of such cases because it's so closely linked to food security. To mention a differentiator or what's different, while climate litigation often focuses on the global impacts, nature-related litigation can be driven by very localized impacts. So something that directly affects communities or ecosystems, and this more immediately visibility is also more tangible for stakeholders and the public. So experts suggest that this will then drive a stronger legal response. And with respect to how to stay on top of these things and what are the resources to tap into, my recommendation would be to track the complaints filed before the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, because that can offer insights into expected future trends and around nature-related cases against corporates. And then obviously keep on track of the landmark cases. I've mentioned a few. And anything we're seeing around new legislation and regulation, also on the international level, because they can then influence national legislation and how governments then regulate nature-related activities.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nadine. Thank you for covering all that in such a short time, and sorry to rush you at the end. Really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thanks so much. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, we have switched over. Thanks so much, Nadine. Really appreciate that. I'm going to hop off the call now.